Good evening. Tonight, a special appeal on some of the most dramatic crimes we've featured but not solved. The crimes are all now several years old, but that could just be an advantage. Maybe you missed the first appeal, and maybe with the passage of time, people who were frightened then or were too close to the offender, maybe they'll now feel able to call in.
These re-appeals are often brilliantly effective. Crimewatch revisited the murder in 1994 of 9-year-old Daniel Handley. This second broadcast led directly to 2 paedophiles, both of whom are now serving 3 life sentences. And it was at the second attempt on Crimewatch that new clues led to charges on the Russell murders in rural Kent.
First tonight, a crime that made national headlines when it happened in 1989. It was a double murder, the shooting of Peter and Gwenda Dixon on a scenic clifftop path on the last day of their summer holidays. After they'd gone missing, a man was seen using their cash card. But despite new evidence from the Crimewatch reconstruction at the time, the crime has never been resolved. The Dixons had been staying at St Bride's Bay in Pembrokeshire, camping at a place they'd visited for years near Little Haven. Tonight, police are revealing new clues, and the couple's son, Tim, explains what happened.
The family and myself have been going to Helston Farm since I was a child. It became an annual holiday place for many years, and in fact, when myself and my sister had grown up and stopped going on holiday with our parents, they continued coming on their own, effectively having second honeymoons together.
On Monday the 19th of June, Peter and Gwenda arrived for their annual trip, planning to spend a fortnight at the campsite. After a week, they were joined by their son, Tim.
In the couple of days that I was down here with my parents, we managed to do quite a few things. We had a good walk along the cliff path on the north side of the bay, where it rained heavily and we all got drenched, but it didn't spoil the spirits at all. It was all part of the fun and the experience. I regret greatly that I didn't take up their offer of staying down there for a few extra days, because obviously things may have been different with 3 people involved. It may not have happened, or it may have happened in a different way. And I regret greatly that I didn't make more of saying goodbye to them that time, because I didn't know that was going to be the last time I would see them.
That same day, a local woman was taking her son for a driving lesson up on Dale Airfield, a few miles from the Dixons' campsite.
We went down the runway and I noticed a cyclist.
Look at that, who's that up there?
I mentioned to Robert that it was silly for someone to be on a cliff path on a bicycle. That's really what drew my attention to him.
This was one of many sightings of a distinctive man with a bike on the coastal path. Next morning he was seen half a mile away in Marlows, but this time he seemed to have a friend.
I went to get the paper from the shop, and what drew my attention to them was that they looked an odd couple. The older chap had everything on his bike, and the young boy was carrying everything. The police have asked me, did I recognise any accent? And I'm afraid I don't.
They were heading away from the coastal path, but at some point they split up. 3 hours later, the same witness saw the blonde man on his own.
It struck us that, he hadn't gone very far in the time that we'd been gone to town, and we looked round to see if we could see the cyclist, but there was no sign of him.
If this could have been you, please ring us straight away. The cyclist, meanwhile, had headed back for the coastal path south to Dale. A Crimewatch viewer contacted police after our reconstruction.
I remember my husband stayed in the car while I went to get the ice cream. When I saw him, I felt uncomfortable. He really did look nasty. He had a tanned, sort of dirty complexion, weather-beaten. And his hair was thick, it was dirty, matted. Well, he looked just like a down and out.
Thank you.
On the way out, I noticed he had with him some sort of carrying case. It was khaki or something, and I remember wondering if it had a gun in it. Well, I didn't see any fishing rods anywhere there.
By next morning, he'd moved around to Martin's Haven, towards Littlehaven.
It was early in the morning, I was cleaning the toilet, and I saw this fella, but he didn't look like a holiday maker, nor anything. He looked like a kind of a drifter. And I seen him getting off his bike and walking up the hill to Deer Park.
From here, he'd have been about 2 hours away from encountering the Dixons on the coastal path.
Oh, a bit fed up with this weather. We decided to go home today.
Yes, we've had enough too. What time are you off with them?
About midday. We're going for a walk along the coastal path first, towards Dale. Give the tent time to dry out. Oh, must be off.
It's just very fortunate in some senses that they spoke to their neighbouring campers on that morning to tell them that they were planning to go home that day. Otherwise nobody would know at all. And so to kill some time, they'd go and do what they liked doing most and go for one last walk along one of their favourite parts of the coastal path.
At around 11 a.m, a tourist in Littlehaven remembers hearing shots coming from the south. An hour later, the cyclist was seen at Bulford, heading towards the town of Pembroke. At 1:30 p.m, Peter Dixon's cash card was used by someone unfamiliar with the technology. He was trying to withdraw an odd amount, but finally settled for £10.
8 years ago, this used to be a bakery in Delicatessen. I quite often did the delicatessen side of it. This particular afternoon, I was tidying up all the cheeses. Then I'd daydream and look out the window. I'd saw this scruffy-looking man with a bike just standing there, really doing nothing. And then when I'd look at him, he'd turn away.
At 4:10, Peter Dixon's card was used again. This time, £100 was withdrawn. Next day, and 30 miles further on in Carmarthen, the cyclist was seen using the public toilets. Half an hour later, another £100 was taken from the Dixon's account. He waited another day before trying again, but now he travelled back on himself into Haverfordwest, only 8 miles from the murder scene. This time, he was seen at the cash point.
I travel the same route at the same time every day, and I look at the buildings on both sides of the road. And I remember looking at the NatWest Bank, because my girlfriend worked there, and that's where I saw him.
This was the last time the Dixon's card was used.
On the Monday I went to my parents' house, and to my surprise it appeared they hadn't come home. And so I checked with their employers whether they were actually expected back that day, and of course they were. So I got a bit concerned and I phoned the campsite and I phoned the police. It appeared that they hadn't been seen for several days. That was possibly the worst day for me because all of a sudden I realised something very, very serious had happened.
For 2 days, Tim and his uncles joined the search, suspecting Peter and Gwenda had fallen from a cliff. What they discovered was even worse.
On the Wednesday afternoon, the police found my parents' bodies, and I think it was down here on the cliff edge.
Peter and Gwenda Dixon had lain for 6 days, 60 feet below the path, 10 minutes walk from the campsite. They'd both been shot in the back repeatedly. Mr. Dixon's hands were tied behind his back. Some of Mrs. Dixon's clothes had been removed.
And I believe that their personal effects were found strewn all around here. So it must have been quite a violent end. It was just the most unlikely place for anything bad or serious to happen, because it's such a peaceful glade here and it's quiet and you can hear the sea. This is a very private place now for the family, because part of our family's history is now firmly embedded in this spot.
Alderman Jones, 1989 is a long time in people's memories. Just place it, that summer, how long was this guy in the area?
Well, we have a very good sighting of him on the 6th of June 1989 in St Bride's.
Now, that's about 3 weeks before the murder.
Yes, there was a holidaymaker. She's quite precise of her dates and also distinctly remembers the events of that particular day. She was on the beach with her son, saw the pedal cyclist coming off the coastal path. Her son ran up to him. He completely ignored her son. She went up to apologise for her son's behaviour, and again, he completely ignored her.
So he's quite dismissive, and I think sometimes quite frightening too, as we saw on the film. So he was there 3 weeks before the murder. How long after the murder did he leave the area? Do you know?
Then there's a sighting on the 8th of July at Marlos, again not far from the murder scene.
That's a week after the murder.
Over a week after the murders, 3 days after the bodies had been discovered. Again, his appearance and general demeanour frightened 2 ladies who were sitting in a car there.
Do you know when he left?
We believe that he may well have left the area the following day, which would have been the 9th of July. There's some good sightings of a man of his similar description travelling on the train from Carmarthen towards Swansea on this particular day, and this man also had a bike.
You say of this description, I mean, tell us how people would know him today.
At the time, he was aged between 30 and 45, so therefore he'd now be in his late 30s and early 50s. We had an offender profile done at the time, which has been recently updated. And again, some of the significant features are a loner, possibly showing violence towards females, at home in the countryside, and familiar with the use of a firearm, a shotgun in particular.
Is he the sort of guy who might have confided in somebody, said that he'd done this?
He may well have done so. He may have, subsequent to the murders, he may well have served terms of imprisonment for far lesser offences. He may have spoken to possibly a prison inmate, but certainly partners, ex-partners, friends, criminal associates, or even possibly people who may have come across him in a working environment, people working in prisons or people working in hospitals, people of that nature. They may well be able to give us a name for him.
Well, I know it's a long time ago, but it's a terribly serious offence. If there's anything you can add to this investigation, please call us right away, 0500 600 600, or call the incident room on 01267 226600. That's Carmarthen, 226600.
In March, we asked for your help to find this man, Edward Adler. He was wanted after his uncle Jan Pollock was found murdered. In April, we appealed again, and as a direct result, Edward Adler was arrested. He's pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and he'll be sentenced later this week. 3 years ago, a 10-year-old girl was abducted from a road in Chalfont St Giles in Buckinghamshire and subjected to serious sexual abuse. A brief appeal on Crimewatch produced almost 200 calls, but the culprit wasn't traced. Tonight, this isn't just a re-appeal. There may well have been other attacks, and we know that earlier this year, the same man struck again. This time, he attempted to abduct an 11-year-old from a village street only a couple of miles from the attack in 1994.
I wouldn't let her out if it was after dark or if it was even dusky, and I'd always find out where she's going, and if she is out late, she's being picked up.
Excuse me, is it the athletics tonight?
I'm not sure. Oh yeah, actually I think so, because I heard some of the girls talking about it at school.
Oh, do you know where it is?
Yeah, it's just down there.
Oh, thanks a lot.
I think, they should be allowed that little bit of independence, because you have to let them go at some point.
I was sitting doing my homework and I got bored, so I went up to the window and I was just looking around, and a car pulled up. It was the day of the athletics match, so there'd have been quite a few parents waiting to pick up their child.
I think initially when he grabbed her, she thought it was someone larking around. She thought it was a friend or an uncle or someone just having a laugh, but then she realised the seriousness of it when he threw her into the car and realised it wasn't someone that she knew. And that's when she fought back and just screamed and kicked and did everything that she physically could.
I heard lots of screaming and stuff, so I went back to the window, and then I saw a man trying to get a girl into his car. At the time, I just thought it was like a girl having attention.
I initially thought it was an irate father with maybe a misbehaving schoolchild. I was getting more and more uneasy. I saw him full in the face and he did look somewhat perturbed.
This is the child's view. The man's being described as being in his mid-40s, between 5'7" and 5'10" tall, medium build with balding, light-coloured hair and possibly a ruddy complexion.
I then thought there is something wrong. I think I'll call the police. I tried to block the guy in. I thought, well, if it is an irate father, I'll just have to apologise afterwards. With hindsight, I should have got out and challenged the chap rather than flapping around with a mobile phone.
It all happened so quickly, and you just follow your instincts at the time, and I think what he did was fantastic.
There are strong similarities with another abduction 3 years earlier. The same area, a similar car, a similar offender, an identical attack.
She's a very bright, very articulate, eloquent child. She wasn't worried about walking home on her own. She was quite happy to walk home on her own that day. I don't think verbal persuasion would have got her in, as she's been warned, like every other child, that if somebody asks you to get into a car, you don't go. She had absolutely no option, no choice in the matter. She fought as much as she could to not get into the vehicle, holding the edge of the car and putting her feet on the footrest of the car, but he overpowered her. He never used any physical force to keep her in the vehicle, but he didn't need to. He verbally used threats to make sure she stayed in the vehicle. If she didn't do this or didn't do that, then her parents would be killed, her parents would be hurt. He drove for about 20 minutes with his hand on her, holding her down, until he arrived at what she described as an empty-looking, detached house. She describes the house as brick. She said it had 2 roofs, one roof on the house, a sloping roof, and a sloping roof over the porch. She said it had no curtains and no ornaments, and she described it as it looked like nobody lived in it. And it had grass and it had a gravel driveway. The fact that both the attacks were close together in neighbouring villages tells us that either the person who's committed these acts is a local person or is very aware of the local area and knows his way around the area.
The child was sexually assaulted inside the car. She was then returned to the side of a road just around the corner from where she'd been abducted.
I can't imagine what it must have been like for her. It must have been an awful torment, because, I mean, this has lingered with us for a long while. I still think about it every day. It still comes into your thoughts every day. And, I mean, thankfully Sarah got away, but if she hadn't, I mean, the implications are so much more serious. I can't imagine living with that, you know, from a mother's point of view or from the child's point of view.
Here are 2 impressions of the attacker. He's white, mid-40s, 5'7" to 5'10", medium build and balding with light-coloured hair. The car he drove was a mid-blue Granada estate with the number E428SUG, but we do know that that was false. He knows the area around Amersham. Does he perhaps live or work there? There was a 3-year gap between offences. Had he been in prison? This man must be caught, otherwise he'll just go on abducting children. Please don't sleep on it or expect someone else to call. Call now if you have any suspicions at all. 01296 396 766. That's the incident room at Amersham. 396 766.
Now some pictures that might look a bit familiar because we've shown them all before. 3 wanted faces. Where are they tonight? This is Spencer O'Shaughnessy. He's still missing despite our appeal in October. Police need to speak to him about the fatal stabbing of Darryl Aby in Luton in Bedfordshire. Crimewatch calls led police to an address in Nelson in Lancashire, but they missed Mr O'Shaughnessy by minutes. He's 6 foot tall with a scar running down the left side of his face and neck.
Do you remember Paul Brennan? As a direct result of the programme, he was arrested and charged with conning the life savings out of an elderly woman. And what's more, another victim came forward who'd also lost money. On the morning of his appearance at Salisbury Crown Court in January, he left to make a phone call and he hasn't been seen since. Where is he now? And finally, Graham Morgan, or maybe you know him by another name. We showed his photo in March in connection with thefts and deceptions. Your calls led police to the South Coast, where he'd been working as a decorator, but he disappeared the day after Crimewatch. Here's another photo of him. He hasn't been seen since March, so if you know where he is, or if you know where any of these three are, do call 0500 600 600, or you can find the local police numbers on page 615 on CFAX.
Now a reward of £40,000 and maybe more to catch a sadist, a man who shoots people in cold blood. He was part of a team of robbers who probably split up in the last 3 or 4 years, and maybe someone on the edge of the gang will be ready to come forward and shot the man who's still a danger to the public. The gang was probably most active between 1992 and 1993, and there may be other robberies that still haven't been connected. We'll take the attacks in the order in which they happened, recalled by a detective who's reopened the investigation, in readiness for calls tonight.
Prior to December 1992, we were unfortunate to have a run of serious armed robberies in the Doncaster area. There were several similar features. First of all, the attacks were cash in transit attacks, and the type of vehicle used by the offenders, in most cases Montego, Rover type vehicles, the vast majority of which were set on fire shortly after the offences were committed.
In 7 months from May, there were half a dozen robberies. Then Crimewatch was called in.
On that particular morning, it was just a normal day's work to do, and you look forward to it.
10-4, over and out.
I really did enjoy doing the work, because what happened was you met an awful lot of people, and you could have a joke with most of them, and you could have an extremely pleasant day.
Down! I said get down!
I didn't argue the point, I just did it.
I said open the door! Open the door!
The others in the gang were plainly shaken by the shooting, and the robbery was abandoned.
You don't know what the damage is, but you know that you've been shot. And while I was laying on the floor, it seemed as though it was an eternity. And you are worried that you could have died.
We were unsure as to the mentality of the individual that pulled the trigger. The security guard, of course, almost lost his life, and it was quite obvious the potential was there for the next incident, for the offenders to discharge a weapon yet again and kill someone.
Maybe the gang had been unsettled by the shooting. At any rate, for 10 months, nothing more was heard from them. But in October 1993, in Rotherham...
Yeah, look at him over there in that car. He looks like a kidnapper to me. Yeah, he looks a bit iffy to me too. He's giving me the creeps. Right, we'll take his number plate. I'll do the letters, you do the numbers.
This brand new Citroën Xantia had recently been stolen from a garage near Keighley.
The two boys were unable to give us an e-fit of the driver, but significant features are that he had 2 scars on his face. One about ½ an inch long by the side of his left eye, and the other about 2 to 3 inches long across his right cheek.
About the same time, 100 yards away, a security van was making a delivery to an old people's home.
Get out! Down! Give us money! Open it! Throw his legs off! Give us money!
The driver accelerated away and the robbery was foiled. Soon afterwards, someone saw what may have been one of the getaway cars, a red sports car, possibly a Toyota Celica.
We firmly believe that the vehicle belonged to one of the actual robbers. The vehicle itself is not the normal type associated with armed robberies. The driver is described as a white male, at that time in his late 20s, which would of course make him in his early to mid-30s.
Then, a month later, 70 miles away across the Pennines, just outside Burnley.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, fine. What are you doing?
Sorry about that. Do you want to pull in over there and we'll sort this out?
Yeah, okay.
Little wonder the Citroën driver didn't stop. This was the stolen Xantia reported by the schoolboys near the robbery in Rotherham a month before. Nearby in Accrington, within an hour, a white Montego was stolen. It was used the following morning in a robbery 15 minutes drive from where it had been taken.
Now don't move!
Burnley 2 patrols report of a robbery in progress at Stonyholm Post Office. A white Austin Montego reported stolen. They've held the van up with a shotgun and a handgun.
Being a police officer does have certain dangers, but you never think that it'll happen to you. It's always somebody else, or in a bigger city. In a small town like Burnley, you just don't think that thing's going to happen. I didn't know what to expect when the vehicle stopped and the gunman got out. It happened so quickly. He narrowed the distance between us and immediately fired a shot. I didn't know what to think, what we'd do next. When he came to the window, I anticipated he would say, "Give us the keys or get out, lie down, throw your radios away." But he just stood there, as it seemed to take forever. And then he raised the gun and fired the second shot. I thought I was going to die. And then you get the pain, and then you realise that you're not, so it goes through your mind, am I going to bleed to death? I need some help. Fortunately, Paul was there with me and gave me first aid straight away, calmed me down.
It's all right, there's an ambulance on its way.
It never put me off. So it never really crossed my mind that I wouldn't return. It's 4 years now since it happened. I still suffer pain from it. I have somewhere in the region of 250 to 300 pellets still left in the knee and in the knee joint, and I'm told that will affect me quite badly in the future with arthritis. Some will come out of their own accord, and they just work their way out to the top of the skin and then break the surface and come out. Others will be stuck there until I die.
Graham Jowett, the guard who was shot 5 years ago, has never worked again. His leg had to be amputated.
If you're shot with a shotgun, what happens is it just tears a huge chunk out, and the damage is absolutely horrendous. And it's something that you don't want to accept, and it's something you don't want to think about. I can't walk very far. I would love to be able to play football with my grandsons, but I can't. I sort of felt that it was the end of the world.
Annie Roper, what do you think is going to come out of this appeal?
We now have combined the information from 3 serious offences, and I am convinced that the gunman, and indeed his associates, will have boasted to their colleagues, wives, partners, about the offences which they have committed.
Can you protect the identities of people who come forward with information?
I will deal with any information in the strictest of confidence, as will my colleagues. I will give a guarantee that if any caller would like to speak to me personally, I am prepared to speak direct to them.
Now, a girlfriend, someone just who knows this guy socially may call him out of public-spiritedness. Other people may be tempted by the reward. I mentioned it at the beginning. Just tell us how big it is.
Well, the reward is substantial, £40,000, and of course, if other offences are proved to be linked, then the reward could quite easily be doubled. I would appeal to members of the criminal fraternity, relatives, associates, perhaps past team members, people that were on the fringes of committing these crimes, who may feel disgusted about the way the gunman acted, to come forward and pass us the information that will assist solving these crimes.
We've got descriptions of at least 4 of the men. People may be able to piece bits of this jigsaw together.
We have 4 descriptions of some of the individuals involved, and those pictures combined with the information about the Xantia motor car and the sporty type car, I feel sure will lead some members of the public to call us tonight.
Mr. Roper, thank you very much. Do call if there's any way you can help. Remember, that reward is massive, £40,000, maybe more, for information that leads to a conviction. You can call in confidence to Mr. Roper personally if you want. You can call now. It's a free phone number, 0800 783 1258. That's 0800 783 1258.
Do you remember this?
The clues are now so strong, someone is surely bound to recognise him in the next few minutes.
The gunman targeted small building societies and terrified the staff.
Steer, where'd you keep the cash?
A Crimewatch viewer recognised him and led the police to this man, Derek Wormold. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment.
9 months ago, we featured the murder of 82-year-old Isabelle Gray in Crossgates, Leeds. There were over 200 calls to the programme, and as a result, a key suspect was eliminated. But since then, new clues have emerged.
Miss Gray was an elderly lady, lived alone and was absolutely incapable of defending herself.
Our reconstruction showed Miss Gray returning from shopping and parking her mobility buggy at the back of her house in Alsthorpe Road. Then, later that afternoon,
I saw a guy knocking on a door, concentrating on the downstairs window as if he was waiting for a response.
that man has never come forward. Miss Gray's body was found at lunchtime the next day. Her back was broken and there were signs of a sexual assault. Since that Crimewatch appeal, it's now known there'd been a gang operating in the area, and maybe the man with the clipboard was part of it.
2 weeks before the murder, 2 men came to this house and approached the owner and offered to cut the trees in his garden. One of the men was in his late 20s, about 5 feet 10 tall, and had short, mousy brown hair. The other man was shorter, about 5 feet 8 tall, check shirt again and jeans, and he bears a resemblance to the man seen walking near Miss Gray's home on the night of the murder.
That night, a white van was parked around the corner from Miss Gray's house.
Once inside that house, the offenders probably beat Miss Gray to make her disclose where she'd hidden her valuables. In the attic to the premises, there were 2 sets of footprints. One of these footprints was made by an Adidas marathon trainer and the other by an Adidas LA trainer, and each of these shoes were only made in one colourway. The keys to Miss Gray's house were left on the staircase, and I believe they were left there by the murderers. If someone's been burgled, and there's been violence used, and there's been keys left on the staircase, please get in touch with us. It's probably connected with the murder of Miss Gray.
If you have any information, please call us now, 0500 600 600. Or try the incident room, 0500 040 999. Another free call number, 0500 040 999.
7 years ago, almost to the day, Patrick Hurling was murdered in Hertfordshire. It was a particularly unpleasant crime, but for legal reasons, Crimewatch could only appeal obliquely at the time. Tonight, we can show you a full reconstruction. And believe it or not, about 95% of murders are eventually solved, and police aren't giving up on this one. A new incident room has been set up, and they hope that this new appeal will jog memories and reawaken someone's conscience.
Everyone expects to lose their parents in a natural way. Maybe I could have understood it if he had had a heart attack. I still remember everything. The numbness, the hurt, the pain. Why? Why did he die like that?
Pat Hurling's third marriage was coming to an end, and a week before he died, he went out with a girlfriend from his early days as an accountant.
Oh, it's so nice to see. It's really nice.
I'd known Pat for about 15 years. We always got on so well. We seemed to click. You only had to phone, he'd always be there. You know, nothing was ever too much trouble for him. He was a brother, a friend, a companion.
Salute.
I cared for him very, very much. And during the course of that evening, we discussed that we might get together. It's like a part of your life that's just gone. It's like losing your best friend.
After the meal, they went on to the Palladium nightclub in Enfield. An hour later, as they came out to the car...
Oh, damn it, I think somebody's broken in the car. Hurling? Go on, love. Get in the car. Won't be long.
I wasn't concerned at the time because Pat knew so many people. It could have been a colleague, somebody new from the nightclub, it could have been anybody.
Who was this man, 11:45 on a Saturday night in November 1990?
It looked like he had shortish hair. He didn't seem overly tall, but stocky build. And I think he was in his middle 40s.
Who was that then?
You've seen nothing, you've heard nothing. All right, love?
Was he the one who'd been tampering with Pat Hurling's car? And was he connected with a second attempt on the car at Pat's home in Hertford later that night?
Gail?
Hmm?
Gail?
Mm-hmm.
Listen. It's probably only the cat.
On the Sunday we noticed that the car had been disturbed. When we looked into the car, his briefcase had been opened. Whether this has got anything to do with Patrick's murder, I honestly don't know.
A few days later, at the girlfriend's home in Chingford, Essex.
I noticed a white old cream estate car parked outside the flats where I lived. This car had been there a couple of times that week in the same spot.
Pat had mentioned he'd been chased in previous weeks by 3 men. They had a white estate car. Was this the same vehicle?
Hello?
5:30 p.m, Friday the 30th of November 1990. Pat's last day alive.
I worked with Pat for 23 years, up to the time of his death.
Considering you've been in the pub all day.
During which time he did become like a brother to me.
I'd like to make 2...
The Friday before Pat died, he was in a really good mood.
I'm going to meet Dave over at the pub. Yes, it's 2 tickets. Yeah, there you go. Just for you, love. Right, I'm going to make a phone call, all right?
And Pat made 3 phone calls in the course of the evening. There was no time that I thought he'd been disturbed by any of the phone calls or they were anything unusual. He loved to make phone calls.
Okay.
2 of the calls are accounted for, but who else did he ring? Did he arrange to meet someone?
All right. Anybody fancy going to Charlie Chan tonight?
Not tonight.
Oh, all right. Perhaps it's better.
Things seemed so good for the future that it was very hard to find out the next morning that he was dead. I think the thought that he was on his own because he hated to be on his own. I found that quite upsetting. He must have been so scared.
10 minutes later, outside the Angel pub in Waltham Abbey.
My boyfriend was taking me home earlier that night, so it would have been around 10:30 that we got to the Sun Street area. I recognised Pat from working with him, and I was just curious as to who the passenger was.
Who was the woman with the dark, wavy hair? Could it have been you? By the time Pat had reached Hertford, he seemed to be alone.
You been busy tonight?
Not that busy. Later on, perhaps.
Yeah, down to pick up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
At any rate, he ordered fish and chips for 1.
Well, I'd been out with some friends and they dropped me off just past my house. It was about 11 o'clock at night and I noticed the BMW coming up from the Hertford direction and I realised it was Patrick. As a neighbour, we didn't really see a great deal of each other. He kept himself to himself. Looking back on it, this is probably one of the few, if not the only occasion that I ever actually saw him smile.
Sometime during the next 4 hours, Pat was bludgeoned around the head, dragged from room to room, and then strangled.
He was just such a lovely man. And the way they killed him was just horrible. And I just remember going through every stage of the way they killed him.
His gold and diamond ID bracelet was stolen, inscribed with his name, Pat. His wallet was taken, and so was a ring from his finger, before his body and then his home were set on fire.
The biggest question in my life is why. Why his parents lost him when they shouldn't have done. Why he wasn't there to see the rest of his children grow up.
Greg Cooper, 7 years almost to the day since that gruesome murder. Why are you reopening the inquiry now?
Well, we're convinced that this murder is solvable, and recent indications show that that could well be the case.
So you have some new leads?
We do, yes. 2 weeks after Pat was murdered, a couple went into a jeweller's shop in Dartford in Kent and tried to sell his gold identity bracelet.
Now, we have the exact replica here. How much was the original worth?
Well, the original was worth about £4,000. It had 25 four-point diamonds making up Pat's name in capital letters.
Now, they actually walked out of the shop taking it with them, didn't they? So you want to hear from them and anyone who may have seen that bracelet since then, of course. What more do you know about this couple?
Well, we know that the man spoke with a southern accent and did use some sort of slang when he was speaking. I would urge that couple to come forward to contact us. They are crucial to this investigation. I can assure them that they don't have to worry about handling stolen goods, but I desperately want to hear from them. I've asked them to phone in.
Now, another crucial sighting that hasn't actually been revealed until now, and that is near Pat's home in Bengio Street the night he died, December the 1st, 1990. What's significant about this van?
Well, this van passed the murder scene about 4:30 a.m. in the morning. It was driving quite fast. It was on dip beam. There was 2 men in it, and of course we know that there was probably at least 2 men involved in the murder.
And they were described as white, I think late 20s, early 30s. One may have had a moustache. What more do you know about the van that they were driving?
We know that it was a clean, unmarked van fitted with a grille similar to ones of 1990 age.
Now, Patrick wasn't squeaky clean himself. What more information would you like about his life?
Well, we know that Patrick may have been involved in some sort of shady money deals, and the events at the Palladium nightclub a week before he was murdered would seem to confirm that. Unfortunately, the Palladium nightclub is no longer there, so I'd like to hear from anybody that could have been there the 24th of November 1990 that may have seen Patrick with this man. I'd ask them to call in tonight.
And briefly, what would you say to someone who does harbour suspicions tonight about someone?
Well, Pat Hurling died a cruel and brutal death. I'd urge anybody, for the sake of his family, for his friends, to ring in tonight with information.
Greg Cooper, thank you. Please help if you know anything about this. There is a £15,000 reward here. Pat Hurling faced a terrible ordeal the night he died. Please call if you can help. The number is 01707 33 5500. That's Welwyn Garden City 33 5500. Or you can call us here on 0500 600 600.
That's all we've time for, but the lines are staying open until midnight, and you can find incident room numbers on CFAX on page 615, or maybe email us at Crimewatch at the BBC. That's cwuk@bbc.co.uk. And if you've any information on a crime we haven't covered, try calling Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. That's a free call number, 0800 555 111.
There'll be no update tonight, but we'll be able to tell you more about what's happened in our next regular Crime Watch in 2 weeks' time. That's at 9:30 here on BBC One on Tuesday the 16th.
And maybe after all this time, some of the cases featured tonight will yield results. So don't have nightmares. Do sleep well. Good night.
Good night.